Welcome back to Broxamer, everybody, and today we're going to be looking at the new Craftworld Eldar Boarding Actions box, and we're going to be discussing whether or not it's worth buying. So, like a lot of you, I was eagerly awaiting the release of this box set. I thought it would be a fresher breath air, to be honest. We haven't really gotten a good box set in a while, and that includes the Combat Patrol. I know many of you out there listening love the Combat Patrol box set and probably started your Eldar with one of those. But I just don't think it was a great box set. I think the GW kind of missed the mark on that one a little bit into introducing new players into the faction. And although I don't think it's a terrible box set by any stretch of the imagination, I think that it could have been much better and much better for a large amount of the player base who really got into Eldar for one and one thing only, and that is their Aspect Warriors. So, how does this new Eldar Boarding Actions box stack up with the Combat Patrol? Well, I have to admit, when this thing first came out, I was a little bit disappointed. Not because I didn't think it was going to be good in boarding actions, but because I think Eldar desperately need a good starter box to introduce new players into the faction, and I don't think this quite gets there. I think it does a little bit better than the Combat Patrol in that, you do get Howling Banshees, which are an Aspect Warrior, a very popular Aspect Warrior at that. But, of course, it does have other issues, which we will go into in the video. So before we start, just a quick overview of what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at what is in the box. We're going to be looking at the pros and cons of the box set because, there are some pros to it. It is a decent box set for a number of reasons. And it does also have its problems. And we're lastly going to be looking at, is the Boarding Actions box set a good purchase for a new Eldar player? So what's in the box? So this Boarding Actions box comes with Jainzar the Phoenix Lord, which is a very powerful melee character, one of the best melee characters in the Eldar Codex, but often not seen outside of very small games or just kind of semi-competitive or even just casual games. We also have 20 Corsairs, that is 2 units of 10, and we have 5 Howling Banshees. And the first thing that just jumped out to me about this box set was just how many Corsairs GW decided to put in it. Not just a squad of 10, but 20 of them. And the problem with that is that Corsairs aren't really, in essence, a true Craftworld Eldar unit. They're kind of like a mix between a Dark Eldar unit and a Craftworld unit. They don't really have the same rules that Craftworld Eldar have. And at the same time, they don't really have the rules that Dark Eldar have. So they're kind of a mix in the middle. They kind of have some weapons of Dark Eldar, some weapons of Eldar, and they're pretty balanced in between. And that goes along with their fluff that they are pirates. They aren't necessarily tied to one faction, and they're kind of just in it for themselves for the most part, as all good space pirates are. But they happen to wind up in the Craftworld Eldar box set. So this set also does come with 5 Howling Banshees. Now, I think the Howling Banshees are the other thing that pops out to me as a great addition to the box set. I think Howling Banshees are probably one of the best units in boarding actions because they can just move so fast. And the boarding actions box, the board that you play on, is very small. And that allows your Banshees to get some great damage in. You'd be surprised how fast they can cover the board with their advance and move. And also on top of that, you can layer things like Ghost Walk on top of them to make them even faster. And not only that, but in regular games, Howling Banshees are a staple to most Eldar lists. All right, so let's go into the pros and cons of the box set. So the pros of the box set are that it has very potent combat potential. Corsairs are actually very good in close combat, especially if you give them the Power Sword and Shuriken Pistol. They're just amazing. Especially in boarding actions, they're very effective. Units of 5 with Shuriken Pistols and close combat weapons can outtrade a lot of heavier units for their points. And if you arm them with the Shuriken Rifles, they can do a pretty decent job standing on objectives and just whittling foes down from afar. They also basically all have Hail of Doom, so for each 6 you score to hit, it counts as a 6 to wound. So Shuriken weapons are going to be automatically proccing their Shuriken ability to get some extra AP. And of course, the Power Swords are just going to hit harder. Usually power swords have a little bit of trouble hitting and wounding harder targets. With this ability, it makes it a little bit easier. As for the Banshees, like I said before, they are a staple in almost every Craftworld Eldar list. Competitive or casual, they're just fantastic. And that mostly has to do with the fact that the Exarch has the Piercing Strikes Exarch power, which gives her damage 2 on her weapons, and she gets double the amount of attacks for taking the Mirror Swords. So very potent combat unit, and honestly, just world records in boarding actions. I can't stress that enough. So I think GW did a good job including them in this box set. The Corsairs can also be built in a number of ways, so they can be flexible. They can be built with ranged weapons or close combat weapons, whichever you prefer, which is a plus to have in something like this. And lastly, all the models, of course, look fantastic and are newer sculpts, which is a positive, right? If you're going to attract new players to the game, it's important that you have good-looking models to go with it. However, as somebody who has played Eldar for a long time, I think this box set does have its cons for newer players. One of which is that it has way too many Corsairs, right? Newer Eldar players that are trying to get into Craftworlds are mostly interested in the Aspect Warriors. The Corsairs are cool and everything, right? But for the most part, one of the main draws to Craftworld Eldar is, of course, its iconic Aspect Warriors. And if you're mostly filling up the box set with Corsairs, there's a little bit of an issue there. And I just think GW went way too overboard with the Corsairs in this box set. I think a squad of 10 would have been enough, would have been more than enough actually, and they should have gone with something else in exchange. And I think on top of that, this box set is absolutely awful for games outside of boarding actions. It's a very hard transition from boarding actions to regular games. I mean, it's almost impossible, right? And I think it is actually technically impossible to do it with the boarding action set. And that's because Corsairs do not count as compulsory choices when used in a detachment. So you need 3 units of either elites, troops, fast attack, or heavy support to field an Arcs of Omen detachment, which currently with this box set is impossible. So that means new players would have to invest even more money to see if they like playing regular games versus boarding action games, which isn't great, right? This box set is already kind of expensive for new players, and if a new player is just trying to get his feet wet into different game types, different game modes, they're going to have a hard time transitioning to that. Other box sets do not have this issue. If you look at the Dark Eldar box set, it comes with 2 units of witches, a succubus, and 5 incubi. You could easily field those witches as units of 5 and meet your minimum troop requirements, right? And you just can't do that with the Craftworld Eldar box set, unfortunately. And also, furthermore, this is something that I didn't really go into before, but it doesn't do a good job teaching the faction fundamentals. So what I mean by that is it has very little psychic powers and very little battle focusing available to it. Corsairs do not have battle focus, they do not benefit from Craftworld traits, and they have very little psychic ability outside of a Wayseeker. And yeah, you could argue that the Wayseeker is a good way to learn psychic powers, but again, most Eldar players are going to need to know how to use a Farseer, and because this box set doesn't have one, it's going to be a hard transition for any new Eldar player going from boarding actions to regular games without one. And the risk you run here is that the player who picks up this game to play boarding actions, the new player that is, and wants to expand into regular games, finds out that he can't do so, and then they end up just playing boarding actions. They say, well, you know what, forget it, I'm just going to stick with boarding actions, this is fun, I'm going to just start playing this, and I'm not going to transition officially into regular games. Which, I mean, is not that big of a deal, but considering we're right on the horizon of 10th edition this summer, I would think that this would be a great chance to grow the community, the Warhammer 40k community in general, but also just the communities of factions that are maybe less popular, like the Eldar, right? So I do think in that way, GW missed the mark with this box set. It's not easy to transition from this box set to regular 500-point games. So, is the boarding actions box a good buy? So, honestly, I have to just be objective here. I think the boarding actions box set is great for boarding action games. I think it's a fantastic introduction to boarding actions for Craftworld Eldar. I just have to admit that, right? And the reason why is because it comes with a lot of good units, right? For a great cost. The Corsairs are very effective in boarding actions and they're very versatile. They're great for their cost. And you also have the Howling Banshees that are very good for their cost in boarding actions as well. And Jane Zar is an absolute powerhouse in boarding actions. Maybe they're not the best picks, they're not the most optimal picks, but they're all solid choices and none of them are bad in boarding actions, which makes the box set a pretty good starting point for anyone wanting to get into boarding actions as a new player and who doesn't already have the models. Of course, most of us have pretty much all the models in the Eldar Codex by now. Some of us veterans who have been playing for 20 plus years like I have. And to be honest with you, are we going to want this box set? Are we going to pick up the box set? Probably not. We already have Howling Banshees. Most likely we already have at least one box of Corsairs. Maybe we even have Jane Zar, the old one that is. I know I have the old model myself. So we're probably not going to go for it. But for new players, it can be a decent start into boarding actions. However, for starting Eldar in general, it is extremely undesirable, as it gives you units that you won't always use in small games and probably won't be able to use in small games because of the fact that Corsairs don't count as compulsory choices. And it doesn't include the units needed to learn the fundamentals of the faction, which is the second part of that. And as you guys know, Eldar is an extremely hard army to play in general, right? And if you don't learn the faction fundamentals early, if you don't know how to use Farseers in your small point games, if you don't know how to learn to use battle focus correctly, you're going to have a hard time in larger games and it's going to feel overwhelming for new players. New players are going to buy maybe 700 points worth of models or 1,000 points, and they're going to look at their army and they're not going to know how to run it because they never learned how from the boarding actions box set. And when they tried to transition into bigger point games, they were left with a deep lack of knowledge about how the Eldar work and function on the tabletop. Also, to be honest with you, there are just way too many Corsairs to be used in normal games, right? The thing is that as you expand your army, as any new player expands their army, they're never going to be using 20 Corsairs in their list, or very rarely. I know that there's some players out there who really like Corsairs that run them and run them effectively, but let's be honest, most Eldar lists aren't going to be running 20 Corsairs in them, right? So I think that's where GW kind of messed up a little bit, and I think when you talk about what a new player can do to kind of offset the disadvantages that this box provides in games outside of boarding actions, I think for those new players, look into actually picking up a Farseer or an Autarch along with your boarding actions box, as well as some Dire Avengers. And I think what this will do for you is it will give you the opportunity to master the Farseer. And the Farseer is a key Eldar unit that is very important to any Eldar battle plan. It will also give you some experience with other Eldar aspect warriors, the shooting aspect warriors that can use battle focus. Dire Avengers are a perfect starter unit and honestly, in my opinion, one of the best units to learn the battle focus special rule with and the fundamentals of Eldar shooting. Dire Avengers are kind of one of those keystone units that work well in any list, and even though they work better in some lists than others, they're a pretty solid choice in pretty much anything, and they can teach you how the Eldar operate on the battlefield very well. They're a great target for buffs, they're pretty quick, and they also have battle focus. And what you can do with the extra bodies that you get from the boarding actions box set is you can sell them. So you get 20 Corsairs, you can sell 10 of those. They make great models for conversions and things like that. They're very desirable as a box set. A lot of people want to pick those up. You can sell those. And you can also possibly, if you don't like Jane Zar, you can sell her. So I know she's a Phoenix Lord. I know she has a really cool model and everything, but you know, if you really want a model that is going to last you forever, Jane Zar is not it, right? A lot of people love Jane Zar, and I love her too, and I use her in a couple of my lists, but she's not a staple unit, which means that she's not going to be in every single list you run from 500 points all the way to 2,000 points unless you make it a fact and a point to do so, right? And that's really only for members of her fan club, right? Everybody else is probably going to run your basic Farseers, maybe an Autarch, maybe Baharoth, or some other form of HQ, maybe even multiple Farseers, right? I know that in most of my lists, I run 3 Farseers, sometimes just 2, but most of the time I'm not running Phoenix Lords, and if I am, I'm typically not running Jane Czar. So she's a little bit of a niche pick in regular games. So if you do want to get the most out of your money, selling her is probably a good option. I know that not everybody would be willing to do that, but again, if you do want to sell her, it's okay. From there, you should have a great boarding action force and a fantastic place to start a proper Craftworld Eldar army. And also, by the way, I didn't mention this earlier, but Dire Avengers whoop some serious ass in boarding actions. They are probably one of the best units to take in boarding actions. I'm not even kidding. They're fantastic. There's a couple of tricks you can do with them. I'm going to make a video probably in a couple weeks overviewing boarding actions and just telling you guys what I think about the game so far. I've played several boarding actions so far. I've played probably like 3 or 4 games of it, and it's pretty fun, I have to say. So I am excited to do more games of that. I don't quite have enough experience to give you guys a good kind of a video overview of it yet. But I've been running a couple of different lists with Dire Avengers and Wraithblades, and it's been working like a charm against my opponents. And again, we're all new to the game. We're all just kind of messing around, having fun with it. It's not super competitive, but I'm telling you, Dire Avengers are probably one of the best units in boarding actions. And honestly, what do you know? They're one of the best units in regular games too. So definitely a good option to have. Buy an extra box of Dire Avengers, get rid of 10 of the Corsairs, either by selling them or trading them with another player. And, you know, because to be honest with you, you're never going to use that many Corsairs. And even if you do, you can always just buy a box later on down the road. They're not that expensive. All right, everybody. I know that was kind of a quick video, but I did want to give you guys my reaction to the Craftworld Eldar boarding actions box set. I have a couple more videos coming out this week. I do want to finish my Harlequin video this week, and I also want to cover Samhain as well as Iyanden. I hope you guys are able to stay tuned for that. And also just something I want to run by you guys real quick. I did kind of put out a post on my channel earlier about possibly doing some hats and different apparel with Craftworld Eldar logos and Craftworld Eldar artwork on them from my channel or just generally from the book. I wondered if you guys are interested in that, because that seems like something that would be cool to kind of rep in your local game shop, you know, show your support for your faction or your Craftworld. Because there's not much Eldar apparel out there. You know, there's a lot of Space Marine stuff. There's a lot of Chaos stuff. Shoot, there's even a lot of Imperial Guard stuff, but I haven't really seen a lot of Eldar stuff, so I was wondering if that's something you might be interested in. I'm kind of working right now on making some good artwork for those t-shirts so that it doesn't look bad, you know. But wondering if you guys are interested in that. Leave a comment in the comment section if you are, just so I can get a feel of it and see if it's worth actually going through and doing it. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. Again, leave a comment in the comment section if you have any ideas about boarding actions, or, you know, just tell me what you guys think about the game type, about the box set, etc. I always love responding and looking at your comments. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. I'll see you guys later. Peace out and have a good one. See you later, everybody.